What's up, my beautiful people? Exile451 here with another daily dose of Reddit Happy, where today we're going into r/AskReddit for some stories about funny pranks that I know are going to make you laugh. So, let's get to it. Okay, so the AskReddit question was, what's the best prank you've ever heard of /seen/experienced? And because yesterday was April Fool's Day, it felt like it was the right thing to go with. My roommate had a really flashy fast car back in the day. We put those light LED valve caps on the passenger side of his car. They only lit up when they have centrifugal force, so he drove around for weeks thinking people were giving him all these looks because of his nice car, but really, his passenger side was lighting up with hot pink wheels. Well, that's a perfect way to get at someone who's peacocking with their car. During my junior year in high school, the seniors decided to flip every seat in the auditorium. All the chairs were bolted into the ground, by the way. The night before a morning school meeting, the class snuck in, unscrewed every chair, turned them backwards, and screwed them back in. When the meeting began on Tuesday morning, the entire school had to face backwards for the whole meeting. I enjoyed that one. 7 or 8 years ago, my aunt and uncle took over ownership of her parents' home. In going through the stuff, they found a box of miscellaneous keys. Not just a handful of keys, but easily a few hundred keys. Rather than throw them all away, they grouped them into the standard size keychains and added a tag with a random funny name and my parents' phone number. Then they drove all over town, dropping them in the street, in the mall, at businesses, at the local university. Dozens of keychains were released into the wild that April Fool's morning. Like the Craigslist pranks that have been mentioned, you get someone else to do the pranking for you. But unlike Craigslist, this prank cannot be recalled. My parents got dozens of calls that first day. At first, my mom thought that the keys were real and arranged to meet to pick them up. Then the next person called with a different set of keys. But my mom thought she was talking to the first person again, and confusion ensued. A later caller didn't speak English, which only added to the confusion. After picking up a set and having 2 more dropped off at the house, she realized what was going on. But there was no way to stop the flood of calls. People continued to call for weeks. Some of the names they came up with were hilarious. I can only imagine what it was like to receive a phone call asking for Turd Ferguson, saying they had found his keys. In spite of being released in the same city, somehow one set of keys traveled nearly 300 miles before someone found it. That's good. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Oh, that's just straight up brilliant. Simple, but many hours of muffled laughter, followed by the entire office erupting in laughter. Hooked up a wireless mouse to a coworker's computer. He went 2 days cussing under his breath and changing out wired mice, holding them up in the air, wondering what the crap was up. We passed the thing around, each person coming up with their own creative way to frustrate him. Did they ever do that in The Office? I'll be honest, I stopped paying attention after like season 6, season 5, season 6 or whatever. I mean, the last episode I remember was Michael doing some sort of charity auction, but that seems like a total Jim and Dwight thing. Like, seriously, oh my gosh. That's really clever. Once my roommate and I spent an afternoon sewing all the sleeves closed on our other roommate's long-sleeved shirts. The sewing was done right at the end of the sleeve so he would stick his arm through, but then not be able to get his hand out. When he first discovered them, he thought that the dryer had melted all of his sleeves together. It was awesome. One of my friends worked at Six Flags when we were about 16 or 17. He operated one of the scarier rides that shoots you out of the loading bay at like 70 miles per hour. He would always tell people, don't forget to buckle your seatbelts, right before hitting the button and shooting them out. There were no seatbelts on that ride. I know someone who would hate this if I got her onto it. Yes, hun, I'm speaking of you. I had a TA that told me this one. Him and some friends had a college buddy that would get super duper drunk and pass out on top of his bunk in his dorm, as all aspiring men should. His dorm was on the 6th floor. One night after he passed out, they moved all of his furniture into an empty, identical room on the first floor. They set up everything in the new room exactly the same and placed him on his bunk. They gave his body some time to sleep/sober up so that he could appreciate what they were about to do to him. One of his buddies woke him up in a panic, yelling nonsense, getting him out of bed and getting him ready to leave. He was able to grab a shirt out of the closet and start putting his shoes on. All of his belongings were exactly where he thought they were, so he didn't notice the change in rooms. Seconds later, 3 others barged through the door, grabbed the drunkard, and threw him out the window. He screamed for his life, thinking he would fall 60 feet, only to land after 2 feet in some shrubs. He got equally drunk the next night. I'm torn. That's like cruel and yet hilarious at the same time. I mean, my gosh. Still, genius. And these next couple are follow-ups here. Some teammates of mine did a similar prank back in high school. Our high school had a twin high school about 20 miles away. Identical building layout, paint, etc. The trees are a little different, but only if you know what to look for. These guys partied with one of their friends until he blacked out early in the morning. Then they left him on a bench at the wrong high school. When he woke up, he was like, "Oh crap, late for class," and ran into his first period class, only to see a strange teacher and strange students within it. "Oh crap, it must be second period." And then he ran to his next class, only to see more doppelgangers. Since he wasn't in the best frame of mind, it took him a really long time to figure out what was going on. Was probably the best prank I saw in high school. A similar prank. A good friend told me that an exam was being held in a neighboring school. It was an exam for an extracurricular business program that was inter-school, so I didn't question why it was being held at a different school. My mom dropped me off 30 minutes before the exam, and I walked into the main office to ask where it was being held. I had 3 secretaries rushing around making urgent phone calls before we established the school wasn't even enrolled in the program and my friend was just being a jerk. Well, that's what you get for trying to go above and beyond. This is the best prank I've participated in. In my college dorms, rooms were organized into suites of 4 rooms, 8 people, that had a private bathroom, living room, balcony, and hallway. Each suite was permanently locked from the main hallway, so you needed a key or needed to knock to get in. My roommate and I had a bunch of friends in another suite. We lived with them the previous year, but left them for a 10th floor amazing view. And one night, we went to their suite to return a borrowed Xbox controller. Upon leaving, we duct taped thin cardboard over the hole that the doorknob latch goes into, thus making the door closed, but unlocked. We came back at like 3 in the morning when we were sure they were all asleep, and we placed on the toilet in the bathroom stall a dummy that we'd made. He was made of jeans, shoes, and a hoodie, all bought from Value Village, stuffed with crumpled newspaper. His head was a plastic bag, also stuffed with newspaper. Then we locked the stall door from the inside. The next morning, the girl that had spent the night there awkwardly waited over half an hour for the guy in the stall to leave, but just ended up walking down to the lobby to use the restroom. A guy sat in the stall next to the occupied one and attempted to make small talk, then feeling really awkward when the guy wouldn't respond. A number of suite mates tried to figure out who's been in the bathroom so long, and when they talked about it together, they realized that it had been hours. One of them finally took the risk of peering in the crack, and they had a good laugh about it and called us to talk. They knew it must have been my roommate and I. Part 2. That last prank was then used as a setup to this next prank. I snuck into their suite again with the help of my roommate. This time at a normal time like 5 o'clock in the evening. However, I was dressed in the same shoes, jeans, and hoodie as our dummy, stuffed with some extra newspaper to make me crumply. I even had the same plastic bag with newspaper over my head, with room to breathe, don't worry. I sat on the toilet for maybe 20 minutes, this time with the door unlocked. Then someone noticed my shoes and looked in the stall gap. He went to get some other guys to show them that Gabe and Ryan did it again. When he came back with the other guys, they opened the stall door and one of them reached forward to grab what they thought was the dummy. So I grabbed him back, stood up, and screamed. And they screamed. It was hilarious. Oh, hats off, man. Hats off to you. That is... That is so funny. Oh, I wish I had more prank stories like this, because the only one I can think of, and this might date me a little bit here, was this one time the girl I was dating, her and her roommates were super into Smallville. And since it was the 100th episode, of course, someone had to die. And I was thinking I'd be cute and funny and just totally lead them on. And it was like, oh yeah, so, I read a spoiler and I know who dies tonight. And they were like, shut up, no you don't. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And so they asked me, and I'm like, it's Clark's dad. Completely talking out of my butt. No clue at all. I'd not read a spoiler. And so I'm thinking, at the end of the night, it won't be Clark's dad, and I'll just have a good laugh, like, gotcha. Except it did end up being Clark's dad. And so they all turned around and started screaming about how I spoiled it and how did I know and I ruined it and yada yada yada. And I'm just sitting there with the biggest crap-eating grin on my face, being like, you have got to be kidding me. I could not have scripted this out better myself. And to this day, I have never told them that I totally BS'd that. When I was about 10 years old, I had a habit of jumping out and scaring my 9-year-old brother, who at the time was very susceptible to such attacks. My parents would get pretty upset with me, but for some reason, I couldn't or wouldn't stop being a little jerk. One night, I climbed into his bed while he was brushing his teeth, wearing my plastic skull mask with a black cloth hood. When he got to the doorway of his room, I sat up and howled at him. He ran screaming, of course, and I almost choked to death on my gleeful laughter. A day or two later, my dad had the bright idea of teaching me a cautionary lesson. He pulled the exact same tactic. Same mask, hid in my bed. Unbeknownst to him, my brother had learned to be wary when coming to bed, and he peeked into my room before continuing past and into his own to make sure I was laying in my bed. When my dad sensed his presence, bolted out of bed and lunged screaming at the doorway. I, downstairs, heard only his shrieking, followed by his sobbing as my dad, mortified, attempted to apologize. Fortunately, all is mostly forgiven these days. Though my brother still attributes the worst scare of his life not to me, but to our father. You've gotta love that. People that are easy to scare can be so much fun. I have a good friend actually that literally I can be walking right next to her and I'll just be like, hey Kim, boo! And she will jump out of her skin. It is so funny. When my parents first got married, this is maybe 1948 or so, my mother took the morning newspaper on April Fool's Day, hid it away, and gave it to my father on April Fool's Day morning the following year. He says that's when he realized it was all over for him. He would never be safe again. While they were still dating, during World War II, they went out to a costume party and my dad made a hat with a relay shotgun on it. He wired the lights to a switch in his pocket and flashed out dirty jokes with the lights to his fighter pilot buddies in Morse code throughout the night. So the party would be going on, and then all the guys would burst out laughing for no apparent reason. Anyway, just thought I'd throw in a few from the old school. Vintage. Sometimes you just can't beat the old stuff. That was r/AskReddit, and if you want more funny or uplifting AskReddit content, then go ahead and check out the playlist link in the description below. Now you guys, stay safe, stay healthy, stay inside if you're supposed to. I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Exile451. Stay beautiful, people.